All right. So
All right.
Now we're on to, so what's the next part, Katie?
So the next part, we called it 6 tips for supporting your non-believing spouses. So I'm talking to the ladies or the men out there who are in my position, who are believers, and what they can do to help their spouses, their non-believing spouses, get through this really difficult time. So my very first tip is to allow your spouse to be part of groups that help them. This is a hard one. This is a really hard one for me. Early on, I didn't realize that Allan was a part of the ex-Mormon subreddit group. I didn't really know what Reddit was. And then I was on his computer and I saw the tab and I pulled it up and started reading what was on there, and it made me mad.
Yeah. Why? Why did it make you mad?
Because I felt like it was so much anger and people just complaining. And I understand now. Why they probably only had one place to air their feelings, and it was that one place was on the ex-Mormon subreddit. So I understand why now, but knowing that Allan was conversing with other people, his brother was out of the church, and that was hard for me. So he had him as a support. We got on these ex-Mormon subreddits, and then he also had Facebook groups that he was a part of. And in my mind,
Mormon Stories Podcast community, there's Thoughtful Transitions, there's Mormon Enlightenment, there's a Facebook group, Mixed Faith Marriages, Mormon Mixed Faith Marriages. There's Waters of Mormon. There's a lot of really, really good support groups on Facebook. And I'm also a huge fan of ex-Mormon Reddit, but for, all for different reasons.
Yeah,
but keep going.
Right. But for the believing spouse, our idea or our thought is that they go to these websites or groups, and then inside of these, they get more information, or they become more angry, or they talk about things that are very personal between he and I, and it's broadcasted to everyone in those groups. And that was really hard for me. And at first, I was pretty upset he was in any groups whatsoever. And it's not that I didn't want him to have support, but I wanted to be the support. I realized, I don't know how long ago, was it 6 months or so? After it wasn't until like 6 months ago that I said to him, I am so grateful for the Facebook groups and the ex-Mormon subreddit group, because they were there for you when I mentally could not be there. I could not validate his feelings. I couldn't talk about everything he was learning, but those groups online could. And so I think something that's important for us believers to know is that just like we need support, our spouses need the support. And so allowing them to connect with people in their same position is crucial for them. They also want to not feel alone. They also want to feel validated. And especially in those really hard first few months when you can't even talk about it, he was able to talk about it with people like-minded. So that was really helpful.
So I imagine there are all sorts of fears that you can have, right? I imagine, again, it's like all these people are angry and bitter, or, oh, he may find someone that he likes better than me, or, oh, they're just, often it's like, oh, they're just reinforcing all this negativity, or, I want him reading the scriptures, not reading rants on ex-Mormon Reddit. Like, those are the normal fears. And again, the fear of him developing intimacy or finding other people. I want to be there for him. He's going to other people. How do you overcome all those fears? Or even that he'll find some other woman and run off with her, How do you handle those fears to get to the place where you want to let him have those associations when, from a believing standpoint, you just as easily might feel like, no, I want him with the home teachers or the ministers. I want him with other believing people. I want him at home with me. I don't want any negative influences.
Mm-hmm. At the beginning of this, I said to him, I want you to have the right people to talk to. So I encouraged him to talk to the bishop and the stake president and anyone who he thought would be helpful for him. And he did. He took my advice and he read things that I suggested and he talked to people that I suggested. And I really appreciated that. I saw that. I don't think I really ever agreed with him chatting with people online, but voicing and communicating the fear that I had to him helped. I don't want to speak for Allan, but I think it put it in his mind so he knew how I felt about things. I don't know if that was like a barometer for you, but like when I would say it's really hard for me because I feel like you're going to make a connection with someone else, someone of the opposite sex, and then you'll have this emotional connection, and I'm not getting that with you. He was really good to say, Katie, I don't converse directly with anyone. I talk in these groups. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, yeah, and we've always kind of had my phone is right here. My Facebook is logged in on every single web browser. There's no hiding of anything. So while I would hope she doesn't feel the need to go on and log into my Facebook and look at messages, I'm not trying to delete anything, and she can go and do that. That's completely fine. I think just over time, it's not a one conversation thing. Over time, she sees that my behaviors are not secretive. My behaviors aren't, I'm not looking to go out and form these friendships, and there's a constant focus on just being open with each other. And so I think that's what was helpful for me, is hearing the concern for her and then just validating back to her and saying, here's my phone. I mean, I'm not hiding anything. You might find a text from John DeLynn every 6 months. You might find a text with my brother that's critical of the church, but that shouldn't be a surprise. That was helpful.
And I think, though, too, what was key was he was willing to take my suggestions as well as find his own path. So while he found a lot of the Facebook groups really helpful, he took my suggestions and talking to the bishop and stake president, and he went and did it. And so I saw effort on his part. I think that's another thing is when I can see his patterns of behavior are to try to do everything he can to validate how I'm feeling and what I would like out of this experience, I'm more likely to get moved past some of the other things that I have fears about.
I'm also hearing Natasha Helfer Parker's voice in my head, because what this represents, the shift that a Mormon mixed faith marriage introduces, is sort of a new type of marriage. The old type of marriage is, and this won't be everyone's case, but I'm just going to stereotype a typical Orthodox marriage. It's like the church tells us how to behave. We're going to follow what the church teaches. We're committed for life because we made that commitment back when we first got married. And we don't really need to talk about anything because we all know what the game plan is. We just need to follow it, right? And, we police each other. We're in the role of policing each other, making sure that neither of us makes a mistake. And then if somebody makes a mistake, we jump down on them like a duck on a June bug, and we enforce the rules until they get back in line, and then we give them that love again, and then everything's great. Well, I don't even know if that is a successful paradigm for marriage or how accurate it is. But what I am going to say is a mixed faith marriage presents an opportunity to shift to a new type of marriage, which is different from a lot of those things I just articulated. Instead of a plan being given to you, you as a couple have to come up with your own plan. Instead of your values being handed to you and the proclamation on the family, basically the church telling you what a family is and what it means and why you should or shouldn't care, you have to come up with what a family means. You have to come up with what your boundaries are. You have to talk about it. That's different. It's a more intrinsic, personal paradigm to marriage instead of something that's been handed to you. Instead of it being something where these rules you're sort of handed to and then you obey, you're having to negotiate that. That builds communication skills. It builds trust in each other. This is something that may seem scary at the outset, but if you can both lean into it, and specifically if believers can lean into this, what you'll see is your marriage starts strengthening. The previous paradigm is that we're committed to each other forever because we made that commitment once. There is a chance that Allan could blow it and cheat on you. Or there's a chance that you could on Allan. Find some believer. Like, the truth is we were never protected from that before. They're committed Orthodox Mormons that cheat on each other all the time. Noah Rasheta teaches us, and Buddhism teaches us that that structures and attempts at control are illusions. There's always the threat of infidelity in or out of the church. So instead of just like we made this commitment once and now we're stuck with each other, this new approach is I'm going to choose you every day and I'm going to fight for you every day and you're going to choose me. And each day we're going to wake up and choose each other. And at least from the non-believing standpoint, it's because you don't know if you have an afterlife and you don't have that eternal commitment. But what you do have is wanting to make your current life the best life that you can. And I just have to be honest. I care more about my marriage now than I ever did.
Right.
And I think Margie does too. But it's not because we made some commitment 25 years ago. It's because now we value making our marriage the best that we can in the moment. Mm-hmm. So there are these shifts. And again, the policing. Instead of like, I loved it when you said, Allan, I don't know, it's not about asking permission from her. Your health, your sexuality, yours too. It needs to be yours. Mm-hmm. But by talking about it, by coming to an agreement, it's a healthier paradigm because like Natasha always says, nobody wants to be married to their dad. No one wants to be married to their mom. No one wants to be married to their teacher. No one wants to be married to their boss. And if you were in an Orthodox marriage where one spouse was policing the other, that's just not a healthy environment for cultivating intimacy. So if you can move away from that policing, parent, teacher, control environment into where you share how you feel, you negotiate, you talk, you come to an agreement, and then these two adults are standing solid side by side, entering into an agreement of what their boundaries are going to be in their relationship, and it's consensual, and it's positive, and it's personal. Again, that's just a much healthier paradigm. It's better for sexual intimacy, it's better for emotional intimacy, and it's better for the long-term prospects of the marriage because nobody wants to be married to their mom, dad, boss, teacher. That's just not a healthy environment for romance, for that sort of emotional intimacy. And most importantly, no one wants to be in a marriage that's rooted in conditional love, where I love you if you do X, Y, and Z. Nobody wants that. Yep. So in all these ways, this just is, the prospects are for a much stronger marriage. Katie, has that been true for you?
Yeah. And I think that when you practice some of these really hard tools that we're using to communicate, to talk, to allow each other space, to come up with our own language when it comes to our marriage and our common core values, you become stronger because you're deciding together and no one's telling you what to do. And that has definitely been apparent in our marriage. Is we've said so many times, how in the world does a faith crisis bring you closer together? And it has, because these are all tools that we didn't have before, that we now have in the belt that we can practice every day.
So you feel like your marriage is stronger now than it's ever been?
Absolutely.
You can look into the camera and tell the believers?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. and you would never think, it's just not logical to an Orthodox Mormon mindset that a marriage can be improved by one person losing their faith in the church. You wouldn't think that's possible. Like the Orthodox mindset is follow the gospel. That's the only way to improve your marriage. Both of you follow the gospel. And
I think that you don't know until you're in it. But for me, when I feel what I believe is the hand of God in it and telling me that everything we're doing and the road we're on is the right road and we're moving in the right direction, I mean, I think I feel that strengthens me, and it tells me that, everyone has their own path, and it's not about black and white anymore.
Yeah.
So
love it. Okay.
So the next tip I have is number 2, acknowledge you're not the only one hurting. So I think that we tend to take on this mantle that as believers, this is happening to us. You are breaking the deal. I am so hurt by you. You're going to have to spend a long time making it up to me.
Right.
Right? I mean, that's how I felt. Buying couches. Which has yet to happen, but I feel like we really are the martyr in this case. We feel like the martyr, and we're so upset and furious with our spouses, we can't look past our own hurt to acknowledge their hurt. And it took a long time. And Allan, I'm sure there were lots of things. Our son received the priesthood, and his brother gave it to him. And I wasn't in a place to acknowledge that that was hurtful for Allan. And it was actually his mom who acknowledged it, who said, "This must be so hard for you." And I felt bad because I hadn't even really thought that. It wasn't until I could get through some of my own anger that I could realize, oh, this is hurtful. He's struggling. He has had a paradigm shift. His world has collapsed, and he is now feeling the loss of his spiritual community, everything that he's ever known or thought. He is experiencing grief and loss, and he's going through this just like I am, but in a different way. And so when my sister's baby was blessed and I knew he was hurting, as soon as we got home, as I got to my sister's house or we got home, I said, "Tell me how you're feeling. What happened?" And walk me through those emotions. And I allowed myself to be open enough to hear how that hurt him. And I think that was helpful for both of us. It hurt me, and it hurt me in other ways. I was feeling, oh, this is so sad that my spouse can't participate. And on his side, he was feeling, everyone's judging me because I'm not participating because I don't believe in this anymore. And so we have to hurt together. There are many times where we've just cried and held each other, and he was hurting and I was hurting for different reasons. But you have to recognize that with your spouse.
How did you get to that point? I imagine that from the believer's perspective, there's this maybe subconscious fear that if I'm empathetic, if I connect with their sadness, if I connect with their hurt, if I listen, if I just start listening, they may infect me with doubt, they may infect me with disbelief, or my heartstrings may get pulled too much to the point where I start considering their point of view, and I don't want to lose my faith, which is most precious to me. And so I just can't ever go there of caring about, and I'm just hurting too much myself. Mm-hmm. So how does a believer resolve those concerns? How did you do it? How would you recommend to a believer to do it when there's so much fear and so much at stake?
That's a good question. I think that for me, and everyone's different, but for me, it took time. It took me seeing over a period of time that Allan wasn't changing. He wasn't doing this to hurt me. Nothing that he did was to hurt me, but he would prove to me over and over and over again that he still loved me. He still wanted in. He still wanted to be part of our marriage. He still wanted to be an active participant in our children's lives. It was those steps that helped me feel more compassion. And I think for me, it took time. And it's usually not right away for most people. Sometimes it just takes the non-believer to continue to show that they're still there no matter what. So for me it was an issue of time. I needed time to process my own feelings and see him in a different light.
Are there any gospel principles, Jesus' example, scriptures from the New Testament that you can draw on to, or modern statements by general authorities that you can draw on to give you encouragement to be empathetic with your non-believing husband?
Well, I mean, I think Christ is a perfect example.
How?
He loved those who didn't love themselves. He loved those who were rejected. And, he sat with those who were in pain. And that's what he asks all of us to do. And it's amazing to me, I feel like through his example, I've been able to see myself in a different light, my husband in a different light, and know that we are all broken. We are all struggling with something in some way. And and in order, if I'm trying to emanate Christ's qualities, I have to come to terms with my own fears and doubts and listen to my spouse and sit with him in his pain. Brene Brown is great because she talks about this a lot, sitting in your pain and recognizing it and then taking that and moving forward. And I think that that's what we've been able to do. Do you want to add to that?
Well, you know what this is making me thinking about is actually one of my in-laws. His name's Reagan. So Reagan is the husband of my sister Charlene, who hopefully is watching. She watched the whole interview last time. But Reagan was a bishop before their ward merged, and then he was released after a few years. But just a few months after we talked about this last time, their son came out as gay, and my sister was the first to say, I can't support this church with what they teach about my son. And when I heard that, and she said that her husband was getting to a place to agree with her, I wanted to talk with him. So I called him, and on the phone, I just started gushing to him about church history because I was in the rabbit hole at the time, reading, and I was just saying, Reagan, this is so great. You're supporting your family, and how awesome is that? And have you read this? And have you read that? And have you listened to this? And there's an episode of this. And he just stopped me. I was just a million miles a minute. He just stopped me and said, Allan, stop. All you need to know is that my family needs me right now. Your sister needs me. My son needs me. It's not even a question. I'm going to support them. And that was it. And for me, that was a beautiful, beautiful example of what matters most. And he's always been a great example for me. And in that moment, he was a good example to look at Katie and say, what does she need most? I'm committed to her. And seeing from a very recently released bishop being able to put that in perspective, he clung to his family. And I feel like that's similar to what you just explained, Katie. That's what Christ expects of us, is to cling to our families.
Is that possible for a believer to put the spouse over their faith or the church? Or do you see it differently? But I can just see that as maybe a false paradigm, which is like it's either the church or my spouse, and I'm sticking with the church first. Do you see it a different way?
I do see it a different way. There are no guarantees in life. And I didn't think that this was the plan for me, but I would be foolish in thinking that the grass would be greener if I leave this situation we're in. There's no guarantee that down the road when I marry another priesthood holder, quote unquote, that he won't leave the church.
Or be a quote porn addict or whatever it is, right?
Anything. Yeah. And it was in the last interview we talked about our stake president a little bit, but he's the one that said, Katie, I would never tell you to leave your spouse over something like this because in the sea of daffodils, there's the red flower, and this is the red flower, and you're focusing on this one thing. He is a good man. He treats you well. He loves your family. He is committed to you and the kids. Why would you leave that?
He's very handsome. I think he said he was very handsome.
He also said you were very funny. No. So when you look at it that way, you step back and you look at it that way. It's hard for me to understand why someone would leave their spouse for just purely based on church and religion.
Right. I love it. Okay, so acknowledge you're not the only one hurting. Acknowledge their hurt. I love it.
Acknowledge their hurt.
It is very Christ-like. How would Christ respond to a faith crisis?
Right.
He would say, I'm so sorry. Tell me more. I'm so sorry you're hurting. How can I help? So you're basically saying be Christ-like.
And he would do what number 3 says. He'd be patient. And that's a really hard thing to do and to be in this process. I think that with most problems that happen, we didn't talk about this with anyone because we wanted a resolution before we told anyone. A lot of times you want an outcome, and then you can go back and say, well, this was really hard and this is why, and this is the outcome that we came to. Well, with a faith crisis, there's really no resolution. There's no destination. And so in this marriage that we've been in, timing has had to do with a lot of that. And I feel like sometimes we try to rush to get where we're going, but you will lose a lot of the important lessons learned in the process. It's the process that matters, not the destination, I guess is what I could say.
And we can be so destination minded.
Right. Absolutely.
As Orthodox Mormons.
Absolutely.
It's all about the celestial kingdom and getting there. You
right.
know?
Right.
No empty chairs, right?
Right. And we have to be okay with knowing that this is going to be the process that you go through, and maybe there is no destination. But hopefully you take what you learn along the way and you use that to help you.
Also, eternity is long, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It's a long time.
Who knows what happens in the eternities?
Right.
Why sabotage something that could be really good now when you have a whole eternity to work out whatever differences there are?
Yep.
Yeah.
So be patient.
Be patient.
Because eternity is long.
Right. Yeah. And this process can go quick for some, and for others, it can be years and decades long. And so just keep going. Be patient with what you have now.
Yeah, we have a listener that's in a bishopric just recently. And, hey, been in a mixed faith marriage for 12 years, and nobody knows but my spouse. And I'm looking at that and going, I couldn't get 4 months in without start making comments in Sunday school, and I got to tell my parents now, and I got to tell her parents now. And he's been in it for 12 years, and now he's called into a bishopric, and he's a full non-believer. And it's just everyone has their own story, their own path, their own journey. And I know that's very cliche, but don't look at all of those around. I'm speaking specifically to the post-Mormons. Don't look at everyone else around and feel like there's some barometer or some goal that you have to achieve. It's not when did you try coffee the first time? Because now you've done that. Now you can try alcohol. Now you can try marijuana. Now you can, or your memberships and records still on the church. You get to decide what's best for you in that case. And that's where the patience comes in communication with your spouse.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Number 4.
All right. Number 4, allow your spouse to respectfully speak their truth. I have a very vocal spouse. And some people don't, but I have a very vocal spouse. And this is a hard one for me because I am not one to stir the pot. I don't like to talk religion, politics, nothing, especially online. And right now, I mean, that's our world. Instagram, Facebook.
Sex, religion, politics.
That's right. It's all on social media, right? So Allan would post things, and it's hard for me because he's friends with a lot of my he has believers on his side also, but specifically my believing family or my believing friends, my believing relatives. And when he posts things, it can be so hard because I don't want he does so respectfully, but I just don't want to engage in that type of conversation. It's just not for me.
That's why you prefer Instagram.
That's why I prefer Instagram, because it's it's a picture and a little blurb. But I have a hard time with Facebook for that reason. And Allan had posted something, and he had gone back and forth with someone that I cared for, and it was like it made me angry. It did. I was really upset about it, and so I deleted my Facebook account. This was almost a year ago. And I deleted my Facebook account, and I decided that I could not be on Facebook because I couldn't read what he was posting, because it's just hard for me to read. And again, he does it in a respectful way, but it's hard for me to see that.
You can block me. You can still be on Facebook and just block me.
It's also a huge time waster for me. So it's like the black hole. I just get sucked in. Anyway, so I told Allan that he asked me why I deleted my account, and he asked if it was because of him. And I told him, well, yeah, partly it is because of you. And he said something. He said, Katie, if I can't say what I want to say, if I can't post my feelings, I will shrivel and die. And that really hit me hard. And I decided, you're right. You should be able to have a platform to say what's in your heart or what you're thinking or feeling, despite how I feel about it. And so I didn't say anything after that. And I'm still not on Facebook, but I think that that's a little bit, I think it's more helpful for me to not have that in my life right now. And that's okay. But allowing him to be able to speak up and speak his own truth is really, that's something he really values. And I recognize that.
In this, we're going to talk about children later, but that comes in not only in Facebook and social media and immediate and extended family and friends, it also is children. And I can just say that it's so natural in a mixed faith marriage for the believer to be able to say and do whatever they want, but the non-believer to have to, button it down, pack it down, stay quiet, and not express themselves. And not only is that a surefire recipe, that suppression, it's a surefire recipe for resentment and anger. It's also a surefire recipe for depression and anxiety, and even physical ailments like autoimmune disorder or other types of physical manifestations of internalized stress. Mm-hmm. Nobody is meant to be inauthentic and to pack down what they're thinking and feeling. So it has to be with time, with patience, with tact, with diplomacy, with negotiation. It has to be that both sides get to speak their truth in life to each other, to children, to parents, to siblings, to believing family and friends on social media. It has to get to that point, or else things are doomed, both for the individual health of the people involved and the relationship. And so the trick is how to negotiate that.
Right.
Katie, is it like I'm going through this, and again I'm thinking you kind of are an A+ believer spouse in terms of a lot of the people that I work with, because a lot of believers just can't get past the fact that they've fallen. They're a disappointment. They broke the deal. They're sinning. They're dark. They're not following the path. And just this idea of not only is like being patient and looking at them with love and validating them and acknowledging that they're hurting too, all that's super hard for many believers that I work with to do, to let them speak openly and honestly. Like, I'm just thinking there's a lot of believers. How do they get to the point where they can not be just angry and viewing their non-believing spouse as a huge disappointment? Like it's basically saying we need to look at them with humanity, but sometimes a believer is going to look at a non-believer as lower than humanity, as like evil, right?
Yeah, and that's really hard for me to understand. I think like if you're gonna practice what you preach, if you're gonna be like Christ is, you're going to allow space for your spouse to think differently, to speak differently, to act differently, within reason, right? But I think it goes back to our common core values. We talked about this in the beginning. What do you and I still value and we can come together on? And respect is one of those. Honesty is one of those. So I know that in his dealings with other people, or to my family, or whatever it may be, I know he'll do so in a way that would represent me as well.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Not always. I don't always agree with things he says, right? But I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, it's this term of differentiation. Within Mormonism, sameness equals good. And what we know in the animal kingdom, genetics, whatever it is, there's an argument, even culturally, who wants to eat, you may love hamburgers, who wants to eat hamburgers and fries every day? Spanish food, Italian food, Chinese food, Vietnamese food. Diversity is the spice of life. Genetic diversity, biodiversity, gastronomic diversity, whatever it is. Diversity is good. And differentiation is this idea that we're different, but the differences that we bring to the marriage and to the family actually add to it. Maybe one's more extroverted, maybe one's more introverted, maybe one's more spiritually minded or faithful, maybe one's more scientific or analytical or logical. or maybe it's the reverse. Who knows? But the point is what if we can get in our marriage to a shift where we're seeing differences as healthy, not as a threat? Yeah. And that's kind of what you're saying is you can represent faithfulness, he can represent something else, but somehow that doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can just be two different approaches that both bring something useful, right?
Yeah. And the thought I have with this, I think of seek for understanding. All of us seek to be understood, but few of us seek to understand others. And I think that in your mixed faith marriage, when you seek to understand why they feel the way they do and where they're coming from, then you can move past your own fears and your own feelings of insecurity.
I love it.
So, okay, my next tip goes. These all are interconnected, right? So, number 5 is to try to be flexible. And so, to give a specific example about this, we have tried to have Sundays dedicated to Allan. We call them Allan Sundays. And then other Sundays, most Sundays, which I'm at church with the kids. And when we know that there's a difficult topic coming up, specifically this Sunday, or the Sunday that this example is from, is when they were going to be talking about the proclamation for the family. That's a really difficult subject for our family. And we decided, well, we're going to have Allan church that day. And so we decide, okay, this is what we're going to do. We are going to do some sort of service project. We'll do something as a family, something that will strengthen us during the time that we would be at church.
So you're willing to miss church?
Well, let me move on with the story.
Okay.
So this was the first Sunday that we purposefully tried to plan something that was not related to church. So we decided there was older woman who went to a care facility, and she'd recently moved out, and we thought it would be nice to bring her flowers and cards and go and visit her. That would be a really good thing to do with our time. So, and then we thought, then we'll go for a hike afterward. So we had the kids write cards to her, and we had some flowers, and we drove out to West Jordan to see this woman. Well, during the entire card writing, the kids fought. They fought all morning. They fought in the car all the way.
Cards out. We had to pressure them into everything. I wanted bacon for breakfast, and we gave them cereal. It was just everything was a struggle that day.
Everything was a struggle. It was such a struggle. And we get to the house, and guess what? She's not home.
Not home.
And we thought, gosh, we endured all this whole morning thinking we were doing this great thing service-wise, and she's not even home. We left the flowers and the cards on her doorstep, and then we turned around and we started to drive home, and Allan and I are just kind of fuming because it's been a bad morning. It's been a bad day. The kids have fought the whole time. And our oldest, who's 13, caught on, and he says to the other kids, "You guys shut up, because Mom and Dad will never let us stay home from church again if we keep fighting." And he totally got it. And Allan and I, we had built up in our mind, and we were hoping that this way of staying home from church and doing something else was going to be so great that we would continue to maybe go back and forth on Sundays, where we would stay home and do something that Allan wanted one Sunday, and then the next Sunday I would take the kids to church. And we thought that this was going to be such like the pinnacle experience. Well, it was a really crappy experience, and the kids fought, and we sent them straight to their rooms. We said, well, let's see. That took up about an hour of church, and for the last hour of church, you will be sitting in your rooms and reading a book. And so they all went to their rooms and sat in their rooms, and Allan and I shook our heads, and we said, well, what do we do here? Because we thought that this might be a good thing, and it wasn't. So how do we move forward with this? And we just sort of laughed about it, and we said, well, maybe we should just drop them off at church, and then have the two of us can go do something. But I think I was flexible enough. I got to a place where I knew that something was going to be hard. I said, let's try something else out. It didn't work out, which is fine. It doesn't always work. But church doesn't always work either. Sometimes it's hard. And sometimes I leave because or on
You think church.
Church, right? At Father's Day. You know, I knew Allan didn't want to be there. I wasn't going to make him go on Father's Day. But I also knew it would be hard when my primary kids stood up and my own kids stood up to sing Father's Day songs, and Allan wasn't there. And so we didn't go to the first hour of church. We went to the last hour of church. And so this is some of the embracing the gray, but you have to find what works for you, and you can't be black and white about it. You have to be flexible. And I think at the point we are now, I'm flexible enough to know that I'm not going to put myself through something that's so difficult, like sitting through a sacrament meeting, a Father's Day sacrament meeting. But I could go to the second hour, and that would be just as good for me. And some weeks we'll do Allan Church, and we'll go to the Rock Church, which we've been to, or we'll go to the
church.
It's
called The Well.
The Well.
Next to Movies 8 in Sandy.
Yeah.
A coworker of mine plays guitar there, so we went and visited him once. I've been to Community of Christ, and my daughter wanted to join me, and she loved primary because they give her hot chocolate. So just little things like that. It's just kind of experimenting and trying this and that, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and you just kind of figure it out.
And that can be hard for the believing spouse, because I think we feel like we're the ones now that have to, all of the teaching and all of the spirituality now has to come from us. And so we get stuck in these patterns of, no, if we aren't at church every single week with our kids, they're going to learn, they're not going to want to be there. Well, guess what? Our 13-year-old already doesn't want to be there. He doesn't. And, I can't force him to want to go. I can't force any of them to go.
Wait, we can't force people to choose the Lord's plan? What are you talking
Wait
about?
a minute.
I think I've learned a few things.
Isn't there a story about that? My Mormon brain is reminding me about forcing. No, but this is really sensitive because, and this is one of the most common issues of mixed faith marriage, comes to me as a coach, and it's like, well, it's a battle. It's like the believer is trying to get the kids to go to church, and the non-believer is trying to get the kids to stay home. And the kids become this football where the parents are fighting back and forth. And the believers often say, what kid's going to want to go to church? No kid wants to go to church. And so if we let the kids decide, they're always going to choose to not go to church. And then the non-believer wins and the kids leave the church. And then I'm the only one who's a believer. And I think it's important for my kids to have the moral influence, the spiritual influence, the cultural, social influence. And so I've got to just make my kids go to church every week, because if I give an inch, it's a slippery slope to them going to apostasy. That's the mindset that we're battling here when you talk about flexibility around something like church.
Yeah. Yeah. And I thought that I was very orthodox and set my ways at the beginning of it. But Allan is really good at reassuring me. And he said, look, I do want the kids to go with you to church. But like our oldest, he will say things like, I'm tired. He said, if it's things that like being just lazy or tired, we'll have, we can talk about it, but that's not a good enough reason for him to not go. If he says to us, well, something was said that I don't believe in, well, then we have a different conversation. Yeah. And I'm flexible enough to recognize that if he feels that way in the future, I'm not going to make him go. Our two youngest absolutely love church, and actually they get upset when we don't go, right?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, so I think that it depends on the child, it depends on the situation. Every child is so different. They handle things differently, but you have to be flexible. And, in your lifetime, the chances of your whole family staying in the church and your grandkids staying in the church and their posterity, it's likely not going to happen, right? And so my hope is that one day if my kids decide that they are going to stay, then we'll support them with that. If they decide they're going to go, we'll support them either way. They need to know that we will love them and support them however they decide.
Exactly.
That's the paradigm shift, right?
Yeah.
The
That's
goal
the
no
paradigm
longer
shift.
is, my goal is not to get them out, and her goal is not to keep them in. Our goal is to make sure that they understand no matter what they do, we're going to support them and love them and try to teach them good, healthy principles.
That's it.
Yeah.
I always like to tell believers and non-believers, mixed faith couples, tell the believer, I have good news and bad news. Some of your kids may stay in the church, but some of your kids may leave the church. And I say, non-believers, I have good news and bad news. Some of your kids may stay in the church. Some of your kids may leave the church. All the time, couples leave a religion, take their kids with them. The kids don't get quite the upbringing that they want or need. And guess what? They become fodder for missionaries of other religious traditions or Mormons. Like, ultimately in life, 70, 80% of the developed world is religious or spiritual. If you think that you're ever, non-believers, if you think you're just going to take your kids out of the church and raise them secular, that's the end of their spiritual religious story, you may have another thing coming. And believers, if you think that if you just hold on to that really orthodox fundamentalist worldview, that you're going to keep your kids in the church, 50% of all Mormons raised in the U.S. have left the church. In these days, that number's increasing. We know about the rise of the nuns, where the largest and the fastest growing religious group right now is those who no longer affiliate with any religious tradition, and millennials even more so. And so what I like to do is reassure believers and non-believers. The health for your kids is not about whether they stay or leave. So many non-believers are like, the church is going to ruin my kids. Guess what? There are a lot of amazing people that were raised Mormon. One of them is you, by the way. You're amazing and you were raised Mormon. Right. Yes, there's pain in Mormonism. But guess what? There's pain in every religious tradition. And you know what else? There are secular, contexts where people are abused and hurt. Mm-hmm. Life has suffering. That's one of the teachings of Buddhism. You can't escape it. The easy answer isn't getting all your kids out of the church and that you could all leave the church and life can unravel. And the easy answer isn't keeping them all in the church, because how many Mormons are depressed or divorced or hooked on drugs or pornography or whatever? Like, there's pain and suffering. I have good and bad news. There's pain and suffering anywhere you go. So take that issue off the table. Some kids are going to stay. Some kids are going to leave. And believers and non-believers, you're probably not going to be able to control that. Here's what you can control, okay? Your kids' health and well-being is not directly correlated with being in or out of the church. But I will tell you something that their well-being is directly correlated with, okay? It's conflict in the home. Divorce doesn't wreck kids, but you know what wrecks kids? Parental conflict. So if you're a believer and you truly care about your kids, what you're going to do is you're going to want to create a marriage that models health and unconditional love and the healthy handling of differences, of differentiation, and the healthy handling of conflict. You want to wreck your kids? Make your kids footballs in a holy war of religiosity versus secularism. That will wreck your kids every time. And you non-believers, those of you who think that I just need to fight with my spouse until I can get the kids out and that's going to save my kids, you're wrong. You can get your kids out of the church, but pay a huge price in the emotional turmoil and distress and damage that's caused by you causing so much conflict in the home. So what's the best model? You guys already said it. What if you modeled a home where it doesn't matter what you believe and you're loved and accepted? What if you model, whether you're in or out of the church, you're loved or accepted, and that becomes what your family is about? That is the healthiest environment. And then guess what? If the kids are religious, they're loved and accepted in the home and they're celebrated. And if they're not religious, they're loved and accepted in the home regardless. And if they're somewhere in the middle, same thing. And all of a sudden you've got this vibrant, healthy family where differences are celebrated and everybody feels unconditionally loved. And ironically, it's the mixed faith marriage that provides the perfect soil for modeling unconditional love in the home.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True. Absolutely.
We sometimes we say like, we wouldn't have chosen this to happen, but now that it has, we're very grateful for the things that we've been able to learn, and that paradigm shift and what is really important is finally taking hold.
Love it.
And hopefully that helps our kids be better people in the future.
Yeah.
I think that doesn't do anything but help them.
They're going to go to universities. They're going to go to workplaces. They're going to move out of state, foreign countries. Guess what they're going to have to deal with? Mixed faith work environments, mixed faith educational environments, mixed faith marriages themselves, in-laws, neighbors. What you want is you want to build kids that are good with everybody.
Yeah.
Yep.
What a better way to practice that than having a home where everybody's good with everybody, right? That's
Right.
beautiful.
Yeah, and they feel safe, and it provides a really good environment.
Yeah.
So, all right, the last thing I want to talk about is ask your spouse what they need to feel loved. So we talk about like the love languages, right? And everyone has their own set of love languages. But early on, it seemed to change for me. All of a sudden, where I liked having service before, I needed verbal validation from Allan. I needed him to tell me constantly he loved me. He was staying with me. He was sticking with me. He was with the kids. And I would often tell him what I needed. What did I need to feel validated in my love? He did the same for me. What did Allan need to feel validated in my love for him? That I wasn't going to leave him. I wasn't going to take the kids and run. I wasn't going to talk poorly about him to my family, to the kids, to anyone else, to the ward members, to the neighbors who asked about him. So whatever that is, whatever that love language is, it changes. It changes in the process of a faith crisis. Thank you. A faith crisis. So you need to constantly talk about what is it that your spouse needs to feel validated in how they're feeling or in their love, because there's like this constant uncertainty that you don't know if you're going to stay together. Are we going to be able to work through this? And if you decide right up front that this is something that you're willing to work through, that you have a good foundation and you want to build on that, you have to communicate what you need and when you need it. And there are times that Allan has said, in difficult times, he said, I just need a hug. I need a hug today. And I'll hug him and validate and fulfill that need that he has. And so that's an important part of the puzzle. Just continue to validate and find ways to serve and love your spouse.
Love it.
I've asked, Katie does really good with this. She expresses interest in things that I know she doesn't care about because she knows that I care about it. So 2 common things. One, she'll say something about the Dodgers, about baseball. I asked her yesterday, hey, guess what? 4 Dodgers made the All-Star team. You tell me who they are. She named all 4 of them, John.
What?
How many Mormon Stories listeners know who Walker Bueller is? Because she does.
That's amazing. That's the most impressive thing I've
I
heard.
know. See, that's
So
what tells me
far.
our marriage is going to work, is she knows who this 22-year-old pitcher is for the Dodgers. Anyway, so that's one thing. The other is she'll ask me probably 2 or 3 times a week, so, Allan, what's going on in social media Mormon land? And she'll ask me, like, what are people talking about? And she's asking because she knows I care about that, and she trusts that I'm not going to say, oh, guess what President so-and-so said and what everyone else is saying about that. She knows that I'm going to handle that respectfully, but I really appreciate that because she doesn't really care about all the things that I care about, but she cares that I care about it. And so she'll ask me about those things. Makes me feel loved, John. Makes me feel loved.
And non-believers need to do the same thing. What if non-believers could get to the place of health where they could say, hey, what'd you like about church this Sunday?
Yeah.
What'd you value in Relief Society or Sunday school? Or, well, you've been studying the scriptures. Share with me something that you've been reading or in your prayers, something that's meant a lot to you.
Yeah.
What if we could get to the place as non-believers where we were confident enough in who we were, but loving enough of our believing spouse to just show an interest because they care about it.
Right.
Not
Right.
because it's true from our perspective.
Yep.
Yeah,
Again, works versus doesn't work. It works for me. So you're going to ask me about
Ward Council.
what worked. What worked.
I ask you about Ward Council every single week. She doesn't share anything she shouldn't, but I'm interested. Like, how are things going with?
He just wants to know if we've been talking about him again.
I know you won't talk about. Anyway, it's fine. I like if you would talk about me in there, but that's fine.